Hello and welcome to a special edition of DNET, the Disability Network. I'm Bill McQueen. People with disabilities have made advances in many areas of society over the last 20 years. One of those areas is sport. But it hasn't always been an easy journey. Not long ago, the notion of people with disabilities as athletes wouldn't even have been considered. When athletes with disabilities did begin to participate, it was often in segregated events. Now athletes are moving beyond that. They've been advocating to have their events included in mainstream competitions. The latest step took place at this year's Commonwealth Games. DNET producer Ing Wong went to Victoria and came back with the following story. It's about the spirit of sport and the new ways of doing things clashing with the old.
Welcome the athletes of the 15th Commonwealth Games.
Andrew Haley of Canada has the lead, but Burkett of Australia is still in the lead. Paul Wiggins with the big lead in the wheelchair marathon.
Excitement and being in front of a home crowd, just I can't put words to it, really not right now.
It was on this track where world records were broken and a new precedent was set with the inclusion of athletes with disabilities into the 15th Commonwealth Games. While most people supported the inclusion of the athletes, not everyone felt this way. Arthur Tunstall, the chef de mission of the Australian team, thought the athletes were an embarrassment to the Games and to the other athletes. His remarks catapulted the athletes into the international media spotlight, and it was this spotlight that never let up.
CBC Primetime News with Kevin Newman and Pamela Wallen.
Good evening. Just one day before the opening of the Commonwealth Games in Victoria, a controversy has erupted. And at the center of it, some 55 disabled athletes who, for the first time, will be included in the Games.
Games organizers call the disabled contingent a big step forward for equal rights. But Australia's top sports official says disabled athletes don't belong, that their participation is an embarrassment.
It started innocently enough yesterday with a Canadian journalist asking Arthur Tunstall to repeat his well-known views on the participation by disabled athletes in these games.
Why not integrate them? Because everybody is saying that this is great, the first time ever.
Well, I can tell you that it's an embarrassment for those people and for the athletes in the village.
There's no doubt this is one of the largest stories in Australia today. There's no doubt about that. It was certainly big news last night on the nightly newses. And I think a lot of Australians are quite embarrassed about having to report this story. We should be here to report the Commonwealth Games.
The answer seemed clear enough, but Tunstall claims his views were misunderstood, and he meant the small number of events and the handful of disabled competitors were the embarrassment, not the people themselves.
Arthur Tunstall has never explained why he was against including athletes with disabilities. He remains Australia's top representative to major sporting events, despite his views.
I'm not going to make any more comment because all I'm doing is feeding the press to make a story out of it. I'm expressing the opinion of a lot of people who are not game enough to get up and say it.
But Tunstall's comments brought overwhelming public support to athletes with disabilities. People suddenly realized that they should be a part of the Games. And for some athletes, this support was exactly what they wanted.
If Arthur Tunstall wants to make that comment 100 times, that's perfect. Because all he did was increase the exposure that the event was receiving and increase interest. And that's all we want, is for people to be interested in our sport. And I mean, that's the same as any athlete. Any athlete just wants to be able to perform in front of people and demonstrate their athleticism in front of people. And Mr. Tunstall's comments only helped to, improve and increase the interest that our sport was receiving anyway. So it was ideal. It was the best thing that could happen to us, really.
It's been really positive for us because it's meant that we've had a lot of attention, and the people who did doubt whether we should be here have made a real effort, not just to say, moan about it. They've made an effort to actually come and talk to the athletes, and see what we're like, and they've actually come out in support of us and said, yeah, we should be here because we're athletes, we're nothing else.
I think that the issue is the larger issue of peoples with a disability functioning society, whether that's sport or culture or just job related or whatnot. That's far more important than whether a sports guy thinks that athletes with a disability should or shouldn't be in the Commonwealth Games.
Australia.
The Victoria Games was not just another sporting event. By showcasing the disabled athletes' talent, it was an example of how attitudes toward them have changed. It showed that they were like anyone else, but only time will tell if there will be a lasting impact. For athletes with disabilities, this was the first time they had been invited to participate in an international sporting event.
I'm just so happy, you know, the crowd is so...
It was also the first time their sport was televised to millions around the world.
Here are the stars of a debut at the 15th Commonwealth Games, Rebecca Bourneman and Elizabeth Walker.
In the past, athletes were forced into the shadows of major events like the Olympics. Instead of taking part in games like the Olympics, athletes have been forced to have separate games. They were given less money than their able-bodied counterparts, and the media paid little attention to them. In Victoria, all that changed.
It is going to be Andrew Haley. Goal for Canada!
Yes! But there was one symbol that proved not everyone supported the athletes' participation.
The gold medalist and Commonwealth champion, Andrew Haley.
Athletes with disabilities received medals that were different from their able-bodied counterparts. The Victoria Games Society made that compromise to satisfy countries that were against the athletes' participation. The first thing that some of the winners did was flip over the medals to see the difference.
We have been a part of the games, we are a part of the games. You know, they said that, and it would be great to have the same medal, but I guess it's what came out of the medal or what you did for the medal that counts really, so it's not that important.
I don't see the medal that it is different from the others, because I believe it's the same. Maybe for them they will see it different, but for me I feel it is the same.
I think it's a shame that hasn't happened, but I think that's something that will also come. I think we have to go through a period of actually proving what we can do, and I think once people accept us, then it'll happen. Disabled sport has only really been around since the 50s, and when you compare that to what the able-bodied people have, you know, they've been going an awful lot longer. I think we have to, you know, just accept that we're developing fast, but we've still got a long way to go.
And it's the 100-meter freestyle for swimmers, women with a physical disability.
But these games were not purely about winning medals. It was also a chance for the athletes to be stars, to perform in front of the crowd.
This is going to be a great battle to the finish line, with lane 4, Melissa Carlton now widening her lead, but the battle is for second and third between Vicky Sims and Claire Bishop, but it is going to be Melissa Carlton of Australia continuing that great Australian tradition. She wins it with a time of 1:09.
This inclusion means, first of all, that athletes with disabilities have a chance from Commonwealth member nations to come here and participate along with other athletes, and that the focus is not on disability, it's on athletics, and that people who have disabilities in their chosen field of life are starting to be included as equals in whatever it is that they want to do.
We always say that sport mirrors society, it reflects society, and I think our society is ready, you know, to move forward on the whole issue of people with a disability. It was also a challenge that somebody had to take on, somebody had to show the way. And we went beyond athletes with a disability. We had a whole program called the Enabling Program to make sure that the spectators that had disabilities could also fully participate. So that every facility, for instance, every venue that we had was fully accessible to people with a disability. And I think it reflected the attitude of Canadians and a desire to move forward.
I guess really the integration for me and probably the best part of the whole games was not the 800, but after the 800, they had a big gap in the program for the next morning, and they asked us if we would do a demonstration 1500, just because the crowd reacted so well. They wanted to see more, and you know, it's a 3-year fight to get us in for one event, and we have the opportunity to demonstrate our sport, and the crowd loved it, and they asked us back immediately.
What we're looking at now is a continuation of this, hopefully in Malaysia and beyond, and also see the day when these athletes and their events are recognized for full medal status.
But it will take another 4 years at the next Commonwealth Games to see if this will happen. Jeff Adams has been working towards becoming a world champion for the past 10 years.
I've been racing, I guess, since '84. You know, I was introduced to it as a fun thing to do. I recognized the competitive challenge, I guess, or opportunity myself, and started to go out to, you know, regional meets and provincial meets. And then in 1986, I got chosen to go to Nottingham, England, as a member of a junior national team. And I went over there and just got beaten so badly that I was very embarrassed, and I guess that served as an inspiration to me, not so much to dwell on my embarrassment and use that as a focus, but to take the sport seriously and have respect for what I was doing, and the need for respect, or for self-respect, drove me to work hard so that I could perform well.
Jeff Adams of Canada is favored in this 800-meter wheelchair race.
Adams has been to the Commonwealth Games before. He was in Auckland, New Zealand 4 years ago, taking part in demonstration sports. But this is the first time he's been a member of the Canadian team.
This is my second games. I was in Auckland in 1990. We had a 1,500-meter demonstration event there. You know, in Auckland, we didn't stay at the Athletes' Village. We weren't a part of the opening and closing ceremonies, and that was, you know, that's all very normal for a demonstration event. But it's also very disappointing as an athlete to not be a part of it to the extent that you would like.
And now the host country of the 15th Commonwealth Games, Canada.
At these games, Adams was not disappointed. Participating as a full member of the Canadian team, he set out to prove he was the best.
Away they go, overcoming the inertia of the wheelchairs, picking up speed as they accelerate around the line.
Holding has been in second place most of the way. He can't make up any ground. Jeff Adams heading for the finish line, and Jeff Adams is the winner in a time of 1:44.
Gold medalist and Commonwealth champion, Jeff Adams of Canada.
The medal is such a wonderful thing to have, but what I'm going to be taking home with me is the memories of the games that, and they are what really mean the most to me. You know, being part of the team, being in the village with all the other athletes, being a part of the team, and you know, sitting in the TV room with all of the other Canadian athletes, watching everyone compete and cheering on the other Canadians, and it's just been such a fabulous experience. And the crowd was, you know, unbelievable. You know, to be able to compete at home in front of a Canadian crowd was such a phenomenal experience.
But there are few gold medalists in a major world competition. While elite athletes like Adams went home with medals, others competed simply to show that athletes with disabilities are no different than anyone else.
For me, the games of sports for the disabled is really great because it's good, in fact, for the world to know that we are people, and we are people, we can do something, and also for we to unite and to show the world that we can do sports. The same sport they are doing, we can do.
Anthony Matuku traveled halfway around the world from his home in Kenya to take part in the wheelchair marathon. He competed in a wheelchair he built himself.
This first design I've made it myself, and it's good compared to the other people who have their own wheelchair. First I want to see how they use, how they have used the wheelchair and which technology they have used, and also I wanted to get a video cassette to see how the games were.
For Mutuku, the games were a learning experience and an opportunity to plan for his next competition, to study the high-tech racing wheelchairs he had seen in Victoria and to learn new skills from the winners.
Now I have to go and start training again. I have to go and start training again because I have not lost that. I don't want to lose sports, because if I lose the sports, I think I'll be out of the spirit of sports. I want to continue. I want to continue in sports.
This is Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And this is where the first Asian Commonwealth Games will be held in 1998. Prior to accepting this cape of many hands, a symbol of sportsmanship, some Malaysian officials said athletes with disabilities should have a separate games. They said the Kuala Lumpur Games Society could not afford to integrate athletes with disabilities. This despite the fact that Malaysia is one of the fastest growing economies in the Pacific Rim. Jorge Fowler says integrating athletes with disabilities costs nothing.
It costs no additional work, none. I mean, and I'm being absolutely truthful and objective on this thing. I'm a business guy first and foremost. Huh? There's not a cent of additional cost. So now tell me why we can't have them. So I think we've proven a lot over here.
But there's one major difference between the organizers in Victoria and Malaysia. In Victoria, the games were run by a non-profit society. Their main goal was to break even while putting on an exciting show. In Malaysia, the games are being put on by the government and a company headed by this man, General Muhammad Ali Hashim. At this time, it is unclear if his company can afford to integrate athletes with disabilities into the Kuala Lumpur Games, despite having an operating budget of $60 million.
I think before I could give a yes or no answer to that, I think to be fair to everybody. And I think it's best that I should sit down and watch what happened here. And I think I've seen enough to my mind, and then take back and look at the overall in terms of cost, in terms of, I see here, am I right to say that the government of Canada gives a lot of funds to bring in the disabled from the Commonwealth? And therefore, within that context, I think it would be a little premature for me to give a definite answer right now here in Victoria on that question of yours.
I think it'd be a great shame if they do, if that's the way they go. I don't think there's an awful lot we can do about it. I think it's only just by, positively working for it and having countries that are willing to do it. And hopefully in the next few years they'll change.
How would you feel if you weren't able to participate?
Wow, I'd be very surprised because, I don't know, it started and you don't want to stop it. You want it to keep on rolling. And I don't know, I heard that they said it would cost, they didn't have enough money to integrate. And I said, well, I don't know how much we cost to integrate. Maybe a few ramps here and there.
If the Malaysians refuse, then we'll just continue our lobbying efforts in a quiet and determined way with the Commonwealth Games Federation. It is a democracy and member nations speak very loudly. So we'll continue to go back to the grassroots.
If it's true that Malaysians are not going to host the Commonwealth Games for disabled, that means they have to give it to other country that can hold it. It's not fair.
There is a feeling amongst athletes with a disability that there must be continued political pressure to ensure they can continue to participate. Hopefully, the decision makers for the 1998 Games will support the inclusion of athletes with disabilities. And attitudes like Arthur Tunstall's will have changed. As he left Victoria, Dina tried to find out if the successful participation of disabled athletes had any impact on his views.
Wondering, now that the games are over, how do you feel about the athletes with disabilities participation in the games?
I have no comment to make. Every time I say something, I get misquoted.
Mr. Tunstall, just a brief comment about the athletes with disabilities, please. Well, I suppose Mr. Tunstall didn't want to comment about the athletes with disabilities participation in the game.
I call upon the sportsmen and sportswomen of the Commonwealth to assemble in 4 years' time in Malaysia.
Whatever the future may hold for the integration of athletes with disabilities into the Commonwealth Games, one thing remains certain. In Victoria, major steps were taken to recognize athletes with disabilities. It was the first time that a world audience could see people with disabilities as full members of society. It was the first time many people had old ideas about disabilities shattered. And perhaps, most importantly, it was the first time that these athletes could show that they were just that, athletes.
What do you think has been gained by having athletes with a disability participating here?
If you ask that to the spectators, they saw another form of high-performance sport. They saw stories, human stories of determination. They saw fine athletes.
And that's our look at this year's Commonwealth Games. We'll keep you posted on developments with the next Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur. The next Olympic Games will be held in Atlanta in 1996, but athletes with disabilities will not be integrated. Instead, they will compete in the Paralympics, a separate games. The Paralympics will take place in Atlanta right after the Olympics. It's not known if the International Olympic Committee has any firm plans to include disabled athletes in the future. Now here's our address. Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto M5W 1E6. That's the Disability Network, CBC, Box 500, Station A, Toronto M5W 1E6. Or you can fax us at area code 416-205-3399. This program is brought to you in part by the Royal Bank of Canada, serving Canadians for 126 years, one customer at a time.